Okay, so we've made it. Week 52, book 52, and this is Hamlet by William Shakespeare. I would assume that among the books I've read, this is probably the one that is most known and most read from this entire list. I myself have read Hamlet, oof, at least 5 or 6 times. I'm not entirely sure. I took a course in grad school where we looked at the three different texts of Hamlet and compared them in a big, huge folio book that's got all three of them side by side. I chose instead to go with the older edition, which is, pretty straightforward. It's got text on one side and notes on another side. So, it makes it a bit easier. And it has taken, I didn't read the introduction. I don't know what kind of decisions they made about the text itself, but they streamlined the text, I think. They did not include variants and things of that nature, which sometimes, particularly with Hamlet, um, editions do. Now, something you may not know is um, the entire production of Hamlet takes something like 4 hours to stage. And the vast majority, in fact, I think every single production of Hamlet that's ever been done has made editorial changes to the text we have. This is inevitable with Hamlet because there are three different texts. I think uh, the two folios and the quarto or something like that. So within the first three publications of Shakespeare's plays, there are some differences. Some of them are minuscule. Some of them are truly significant. And my understanding is that if you were to stage every single scene from every single um, of these editions, that you would wind up with contradictions in the play that don't work, which is not necessarily a problem, but it is an editorial choice. So anyway, so Hamlet. Now, everybody knows the basic story, right? The Prince of Denmark, Hamlet. Um, he discovers that his um, late father was actually murdered by his uncle, who is now king of Denmark. And his mother, Gertrude, has now married the king. Um, it would appear that Gertrude is unaware of the fact that her new husband has killed her old husband. Although, I mean, I would imagine among Shakespeare scholars, there can be some kind of textual debate about this or whatever. I don't really know. I think she doesn't know. Anyway, Hamlet finds this out by a visitation from his father's ghost in the first act of the play. And he dithers back and forth to whether or not this is a true revelation or deceit. And eventually he decides that it's true that his uncle really did this. Uncle really did kill his father. But then he dilly dallies on what he should really do about this. And the play ends famously with with a duel between Laertes and Hamlet. And one of the swords is poisoned, and there's a poisoned cup of wine, and everybody ends up dying. Hamlet gets pricked with the poisoned sword. Laertes gets pricked with the poisoned sword. Gertrude drinks poisoned wine. The king um, drinks is pricked by the sword by Hamlet and also is forced to drink the wine. And everyone dies, and then Horatio is left at the end to tell the story as Fortinbras comes in and I think takes over the kingdom. I'm not really 100% sure on what Fortinbras does at the end, but I think he comes in and is going to take over the kingdom. So, and apparently that this story was actually a myth or maybe even an historical event that really happened. Hamlet is a real king. Now, how true is this to the history? One, I don't know. And two, I don't think anyone cares, except for maybe a scholar or two. Shakespeare's main purpose in telling even true stories when he did the histories was the drama, not necessarily to represent history accurately. So, everybody knows this story. So why read it again? Well, two things. One, being the very last text in this series, I wanted something that was, somewhat meaningful and interesting and not just a crappy book. So that was one thing, to do something, end on a high note with something that was really kind of, exceptional and known to be good writing. Two, it's short. And in some circumstances, that wouldn't really matter. But unfortunately, this is the final day of my year. So I have to get this video done today if I'm going to get it done in a year. Now, that's only my own personal goal. There's nobody forcing me to do it, one a week, but I wanted it to come out that way. Now, if you've kept track of when I have recorded videos, you will see that I've gotten behind a few times. Um, Sometimes I got behind because I just didn't feel like recording a video, even though I was done with the book. Other times I legitimately got behind on the reading for various reasons, but I made it. A third reason to read Hamlet is it's been on my radar to reread Shakespeare for a while. Over time, I have read, I believe, all of Shakespeare's plays except Two Noble Kinsmen, who at the time when I first started that project was kind of not viewed as canonical as it is now. Even in the past 20 years, Two Noble Kinsmen has moved up as being a legitimate play from questionable to legitimate, even more so than some of his other plays. Like I mean, I'm no Shakespeare expert, so, but I believe Pericles, for instance, is not viewed as necessarily Shakespeare, at least not Shakespeare's, um, fully Shakespeare's play. It was helped, but then we know that Fletcher helped with some of the plays towards the end, particularly, and so you know, so we have, I think it's what with the inclusion of the Two Noble Kinsmen, I think it's 33 plays. Um, So, what can we say about Hamlet that has not been said before or is worth saying here? Well, first of all, it's definitely worth reading. We all know the famous to be or not to be speech. Many people know Alas, poor York. I knew him, Horatio. People know that speech. And there are other lines that throughout the play that people know and will recognize. So there's that. The other thing is, what we have here is we have an examination of the importance of action. Now, exactly what is going on in terms of is he mad? Is this, um, why is he not acting? That sort of thing. But see, to act is to put a force on the world, and to not act can seem sometimes like it is not an action. But to choose not to act is itself also an action. So by choosing to not act, Hamlet is influencing the world of the play just as much as if he did act. And I think that's the struggle that like the to be or to not to be speech, which is it's about self-harm. Um, but the reason why Hamlet is considering self-harm is because he doesn't want to deal with the reality of having to make a choice in the world. He doesn't want to have to make the choice whether or not he should act, whether he should kill the king, whether he should act on what this ghost has told him. And therein lies a very interesting thing. Why is there a ghost in this play? Are we meant to see the ghost as a psychological thing that's going on with Hamlet? After all, Except in one scene, he pretty much is the only one who can hear the ghost. Um, so why is this ghost here? Well, as a narrative device, the ghost is there to give Hamlet, the backstory of how his father was killed. That's helpful for the play. Although, there are other methods that a playwright could use to get that detail in there, that the ghost is partially an information dump. Um, but there's also the possibility that the ghost is a manifestation of Hamlet's uh, shattered mind, and that's the other thing too. How mad is he? Well, he's not mad in the sense that an action is an important thing. That putting that force on the world is important. So the dilemma that he's facing is not a mad dilemma. His approach to it may, in fact, be. You know, how do we act in the world? How are we supposed to do things? And this has actually been something of a theme you can see throughout many of the books I have read here, all the way through, because it is always a uh, a thing related to how we act, and how we want the world to be, how the world quote should be versus how the world is. This is oftentimes an important distinction. And what we do when we act is we have the ability to instantiate a state of being, to instantiate a is from an ought. The world ought to be such a way, so I will make it that way. But we have, many potential unintended consequences of actions, both internally and externally, to deal with. It is not just, I force the world to do what I want it to do, and the world is like I like it. That's not how it works. Our actions don't have that kind of force. So that is not a mad dilemma that Shakespeare puts in Hamlet's mind. For instance, he rashly kills Polonius because he thinks Polonius is the king. He fails to kill Claudius when he can because Claudius is praying. Okay, so there's a case where he didn't act when maybe he should have if he wanted to just eliminate Claudius. But he was aware that in his theological understanding, if he were to kill Claudius while Claudius is at his prayer, Claudius would go to heaven. And he didn't want that to happen to the person he was killing out of revenge for the death of his father. So he refuses to do it at that point. But then he seizes a chance and accidentally kills Polonius, who he thinks is going to be Claudius when he's talking to his mother. Okay, so here is a consequence of his inaction, or maybe it's a consequence of his action, you know, uh, because now Polonius is dead. And because Polonius is dead, that sets up the conflict with Laertes that eventually leads to everybody dying at the end, but it also leads to the self harm that Ophelia does to herself because Ophelia is in love with Hamlet, but this man has killed her father. She's unsure of Hamlet's love because Hamlet is demonstrating insanity. He's demonstrating insanity either because he is truly upset about the death of his father and the revelations of the ghost, or he's feigning madness to avoid getting hurt by the king himself if the king discovers that he knows his secret. So these are the complexities that are built in the concept of making an act, in acting. And, you know, and Hamlet wants to act with full knowledge. He doesn't want to act with partial knowledge, which is why he has the play, the staged in the center of the play, uh, enact reality. Okay. And this sort of device of putting a play within the play that mirrors the concept of the play is a wonderful sort of meta before meta was a thing that Shakespeare's doing here. Because remember, this entire play is, in fact, a reflection of a real event. So it is a real event that is enacted. So, in the scope of history, this play is a play within the play. So with the play in the play, we have a play within the play within the play. And, you know, have fun with that. 'Cause I'm sure Shakespeare did. And that is what's going on here in terms of how do we get that certainty to act? Well, we get that certainty by focusing on certain details and creating a pattern. We are pattern making creatures, and the entire way in which a play is made is a pattern. It's 5 acts. There are lines. Each line is iambic pentameter. So you have 5 acts. You have lines that are 5 beat each, iambic pentameter or in blank verse, which is non-rhyming iambic pentameter. Um, Shakespeare obviously uses couplets as well, although I think there are only a handful in this play, usually at the end of an act or the end of a speech or that kind of thing. So there aren't many. It's mostly blank verse, which is a stylistic choice that Shakespeare moved between blank verse and prose and rhymed couplets as he matured in his craft and as he, I guess, just felt things in certain ways. Um, so yeah, so that is the whole focus here. Is this, when should an action be taken? How certain should we be in order to make it particularly a decisive action, like taking someone's life? That's not the same thing as choosing what you're going to have for breakfast. Choosing what you have for breakfast may seem to be an inconsequential decision. It is an act, it is a choice, but does it have the consequences that one has when one decides to take a life? So, anyway, I really enjoy Shakespeare. I really enjoy this play. I have to admit that not having read it in a while, there are passages that are kind of cryptic. Shakespeare puts a lot of words in Hamlet's mouth, and not all of it immediately makes sense. It does make sense if you read it more slowly, if you go through it closely, and I'm assuming if you were Elizabethan and were hearing this in the original and see it enacted in front of you, that'd be different. But, all right, so we're at the end of 52 weeks. I will continue this. I've enjoyed it. I'm not sure what the next installment will be. It will be next week. I mean, I'm going to continue, but I haven't decided. I think I might just finish out the calendar year and start fresh with year 2 in terms of numbering in the first week of January. That strikes me as maybe a little easier to manage than doing this, just starting in the second week of November kind of thing, or the first week of November, actually. So, anyway, well, starting, I guess, in the second week, ending in the first week. All right, so I'll get there. All right, well, if you've enjoyed this, please let me know. I mean, the series and, of course, this review itself. And, as always, have a good day.